LawCall is provided in the public interest by Timberlake League and Brooks, which pays an advertising fee to this station.
This is WAAY 31 Law Call.
Good evening and welcome to WAAY 31 Law Call. I'm Sharon Doviet. Tonight we're talking about legal issues in the news. It's kind of an Ask Us Anything show tonight, but also interested in hearing what your thoughts are, what your questions are, and your opinions are of some of the legal issues that have been in the news. Things like, the Supreme Court ruling on tariffs. We've also had the FDA's controversial decision to drastically loosen some regulations on some chemicals, the glyphosate, I think I'm saying it right. And then, of course, the Epstein files. Why we've seen the UK arrest a member of the royal family, but we haven't seen any kind of prosecutions going on here. If you're frustrated or if you've got thoughts, maybe it's not upsetting to you, you've got reasons to try to share with your family members that they don't see it the way you do. Call in. We're eager to hear your thoughts. 256-536-0077. You can call and be live on the air with us. You can also text us to that same number. You can also email any legal question any day of the week. You send it to lawcall@waytv.com. And when we get to a show that's on point, we pull some out. We've got some of your questions tonight. Will League is here from Timberlake League and Brooks. A lot of stuff in the news this week.
It's good. It's Thanksgiving with around the table, everybody talking about it. But yeah, a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. So everything from hit us up with some of these top things that you've seen coming into the news. We've got a graphic here about things that maybe you'd like to talk about tonight.
I looked at it, and so our producers were talking about the Supreme Court tariff ruling, and basically, if you remember from civics class, we talk about the tariff ruling. So Congress has the ability to tax, okay? So basically, the Trump administration was basically saying, hey, there's emergency powers, give me the power to tax. Congress struck that down, and basically Congress has to give unambiguous instructions for the president to use these tariffs. Now, they responded by doing another tariff, so we'll see.
So what do you do there?
So we will see, and with regard to, a Supreme Court ruling, that's the law of the land right now. And so it's going to have to be, addressed by this court, the Supreme Court, for it to make any type of change. Okay. And so once the Supreme Court rules, the doctrine of stare decisis, all you law students out there, basically says the one on top rules, and it filters down through federal and state law to the extent it conflicts with this federal law. This is regard to the president. So, it's here we are, and I guess there's going to be another appeal. Now, on the tariffs, there are lawsuits going on. So basically, it's a tax. So let's say if you're an importer and you've paid 30% more for your baseball gloves or for your whatever you're bringing in, then that's an illegal tax. The Supreme Court just ruled, and now there's class actions going for businesses to obtain those taxes they paid back. Where it's going to be decided, it's going to be a long legal battle, but that's what's happening now, and we'll see where that goes.
And then we've got the FDA restrictions. So that's like the chemicals in, I think Roundup is one of the well-known chemicals. We've been seeing lawsuits and things all along for some of these chemicals.
Some of the ultra-processed foods, they're taking a stab at those, and some of the regulations are strengthening from health perspective, or at least arguably so, and others are weakening. Faster approval of drugs. That could be, that's better for business, but is it good for consumer protection? And so when you're looking at, you're putting something in your body, you want the most thorough FDA inspection you can have. And so taking some of those regulations off, while it may be good for business, could be bad for the consumer, and it's a little nerve-wracking to not have guardrails when you're talking about medication. Yeah. And so arguably it's safer with more oversight, but maybe we're wrong. I don't know.
Some of those things, the Roundup, so when you have something like that from a chemical that's been, a product that's been out in the market, how does that work? If somebody in my family thinks they were injured by that chemical, they've got, is it a class action suit? Do you have to go sue wherever the headquarters is? How does something like that transpire?
So basically, there's a suit, and a lot of it has been resolved, 2/3 arguably, and there's been a $6.4 billion reserve funds for the victims, for the folks. And so the criteria is you're exposed to Roundup in a consistent manner for a long period of time, oftentimes years, without any type of protection. And if you there's classifications, usually class actions, you have to have the same injury. And so there are exceptions, but they'll put them in categories. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, if you had these types of cancers, then those qualify.
Okay.
And so and basically there's going to be a time period for people to come forward and say, yes, I was diagnosed with cancer, I had this, to be able to prove their exposure, and they will be entered into that class, or they can opt out and do their own lawsuit.
Okay.
And so, but usually when you're talking about that large of litigation or that, that many people, it's better to join the class. But again, it's each person's decision.
One of our email questions, the second one from Marlon. Marlon was asking about it. He was saying, has anyone won a lawsuit against Roundup? How do you prove that the cancer you have was caused by that one chemical when there's so many other things out there that can cause cancer?
Right.
So are there no lawsuits anymore? It's been settled, and that's just how it's going to be resolved?
Each side have experts saying, okay, what's the link? Remember the baby powder cases,
Right.
Johnson & Johnson. There was a link between some of the tests and the particular type of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, similar, based on the lymph nodes and where the cancer is, based on where you were exposed and how long you were exposed, certain type of cancers qualify. And those experts have come in and they'll do the science in, let's say, the first 100, 200 cases. And then that will be applied to the class,
Okay.
For the rest, and whatever category you fit into. And so, if you have been exposed, contact an attorney, and you want to, get your medical records and have your case evaluated to see if it fits in that category.
Okay.
And the problem is there, again, they found documents where they knew it was dangerous and put profits over people.
Gotcha.
And so that's typically where these companies get in trouble when they've got these studies to actually show the risk, of cancer-related diagnosis and the exposure to this, and without providing a warning. Would it something else you'd use? Probably.
Yeah. We've got callers waiting. We've got Howie on the line with a question or comment from Huntsville. Hi, Howie. Thanks for watching tonight. What's your question or comment?
Yeah, I noticed that the Constitution, they refer to Section 8 on Article 1, says that Congress has the power to lay and collect duties. It doesn't say tariffs. So I want to know what is the difference between a duty and a tariff. I also want to know if the money that's been collected for tariffs, if that's earmarked, which is generally given back equally to the general public, so there's a zero net revenue, is it still a tax if it doesn't raise revenue?
Well,
Interesting.
Yeah, right. I believe they're defining the tariff as a tax. And that's clearly something within the constitutional range, of Congress to levy. And if it's being used as a tax, Congress has the ability to give the president that power to use those tariffs, but if they're calling it a tax, then they have to clearly and unambiguously provide that express authority to the president unless in an emergency situation. And the president, I believe, has been claiming it's an emergency situation from whether it be foreign policy and whatnot. There was a 6-3 decision, I think last week. And so, but good point.
Howie, would you like to just have it divided among all the American people, or what do you think ought to be done with those funds? Are you still with us?
Well, what I'm saying is if you divide it equally and give the money back, then it's a zero revenue because it's not actually a tax that raised money because it wound up not going to, they can't use to spend on items in the budget. It's zero revenue. So if it's zero revenue, then it's not a tax. And again, as I read the Constitution, it doesn't use the word levy. It uses duties. I know duties are money that you pay on imports. So.
Well, Hallie, let me ask you this. Who's paying it? Is the manufacturer here, is the wholesaler who's bringing it into the country, are they paying it, or is the foreign shipper paying it? Arguably, under the Supreme Court ruling, that the wholesaler here in town or here in the country was actually, if it's a $100 unit, they're paying $130. And so it's arguably the wholesaler's paying that, and that's where they're trying to get that money back that they claim they've already expended.
We've got Ali on the line with a question or comment from Russellville. Hi, Ali. Thanks for calling. What's your question or comment tonight?
Yes, I was calling about a tax question.
Okay.
I had a family member last year that had just opened up a lawn care service, and he got tax papers back this year, and the tax papers is stating that they didn't say he owed anything, they just said that on the paper that he owed, not owed, but his business made over $4,000, when in reality it was a fraud, because the guy that wrote him the 2 checks over $4,000, when he deposited them, the bank accepted them, they was fine. But then about a week later, the bank said that there were fraud checks and they couldn't accept them, but they already had accepted them. So now he got to pay the bank back the money. So would he have to pay the state back or the federal back for that, and plus pay the bank as well?
Well, okay, so let's say they gave him 2 checks. They were wrong or they weren't good. The bank still cashed those checks, gave him the money. He realized that profit. On that profit, he had to pay taxes. But now he's saying, I got to pay it back to the bank. If he has to pay it back to the bank, which he would have to pay it back to, he would have to, basically give that money back and then appeal to the IRS because he already had income.
Yeah.
So he'd have to take a deduction or business expense showing it wasn't any good.
Seems like
and
he'd have
the
good-
extra money he had to pay for the bad check, he could expense that and deduct that from his taxes, but it's not a good scenario.
Seems
that's
like
for
he'd
sure.
have good evidence, though. He can clearly show that if he gives the money back. Seems like he'd be able to show that to the IRS.
Yeah. I mean, I think he'd owe the tax, but he'd have to show them and make that appeal.
Yeah. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back answering your questions about all kinds of legal issues in the news this week.
which pays an advertising fee to this station.
You're watching WAAY 31 Law Call. Your rights, your calls, live. Presented by the Tennessee Valley's award-winning personal injury and wrongful death law firm, Timberlake, League & Brooks. Featuring the knowledge and experience of Attorney Michael Timberlake, Attorney Will League, Attorney Heath Brooks, Attorney William Maservi, and hosted by broadcaster and family law attorney Sharon Doviet. This is WAAY 31 Law Call.
Welcome back. Tonight we're talking about legal issues in the news and inviting you to call in and tell us your thoughts or ask your questions. Everything from what are your thoughts on the Epstein case? What are your thoughts about tariffs? We've already had a lot of calls coming in. We also wanted to talk about something that Timberlake, League & Brooks provides at the VBC for people. Thank you very much for this service because it's awfully nice.
Yeah, right. Broadway Theater League, and we sponsor the wheelchair access part to get folks to and from. And I know a lot of the elderly folks want to enjoy those shows,
Yes.
and so we get them to and from their seats. So
It can be a long way to go.
Yeah, that's it. That's right. That's exactly right.
So this Tuesday through Sunday at the VBC. So if you need something like that, just feel free to call and they will take care of you while you're there and enjoy the show. We've got callers waiting with comments. We've got Mark on the line from Elkmont. Hi, Mark. Thanks for calling in. What are your thoughts or questions about legal issues in the news this week?
Hi, thank you guys for having me. On New Year's Eve, my best friend and his wife got into a tussle. They both ended up with black eyes. They did a police report for her, but refused to do one for him. And he's since got arrested and went through the whole rigmarole. I just wanted to know, why is that okay for them to do a report for one party and not the other?
You know, it's a good question, Mark. They weren't there. They didn't see it, right? The
Police officers didn't witness any of it, right?
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah, you know, that's puzzling. You know, it's the officer's call who they're going to charge, but you would think if there's a report, if he made a report there at the scene, then that would be mandatory. At least this is what he said. This is his side of the story. Yeah. You know, but again, it's a judgment call as to who they're going to take. You know, you're balancing, you know, keeping everybody safe when you're talking about domestic relations cases. Now, you talk to officers, and some of the most, you know, frightening scenarios are coming up on domestic relations, you know, homes not knowing what's happening. Yeah. And so you know, the officers have had a rough time with that, and they really, you know, are trying to be as careful as they possibly can to separate the people and try and keep them safe first and foremost. Now, the law, basically, it's assault. Now, let's say they did not do a report. He could go down to the magistrate, fill out a report, go to the police station, fill out a report, and do what's called an outside warrant, claiming that he was the victim of an assault or battery. And so that is another way if the officer does not do the report there at the home at that particular time.
We've got Patty on the line with a question or comment from Huntsville. Patty, thanks for watching tonight. What are your thoughts tonight?
Hi, good afternoon, y'all.
Hi.
I want to make a comment about the tariffs.
Okay.
When are people going to realize, and I learned about tariffs in school in accounting, when are people going to realize that these other countries are charging us anywhere from 100 to 250% of our product that goes to them, that we have to pay them? But when they sell stuff to our country or ship it over here, they don't want to have to pay tariffs.
So you feel like it's about time for America to do it?
15%.
Okay.
So you're saying, Patty, there should be some type of, equal tariffs, basically, which
yes.
It's hard to disagree with. What would be, I'm unfamiliar with what the scale is, but basically, the emergency tariff, the president can do it, but again, Congress gives that power. Congress can regulate, they have the purse strings. They collect taxes. They approve budgets and things like that. And the Supreme Court ruling was basically given, saying, look, there's three branches of government, and Congress has that power. Congress should, go and vote for your legislature, call your legislator's office, and let them know about you're for or against these tariffs, because they're the ones, the legislature, to make this policy and to have this economic balance. And if it is out of whack, it's up to Congress to fix it.
We got in a text message. I'm going to boil it down just a little bit for some of the language. If the president were found to be a pedophile, could he just pardon himself?
Oh, man.
That's what we're worried about. So
well, that's a constitutional crisis.
That would be difficult. We've got callers waiting. Harvey's on the line with a question or comment from Huntsville. Hi, Harvey. Thanks for watching. What's your comment tonight?
Yes, my question is, I have two family members who was willed some property. One of the property being a house, and one of the family members don't want anything to do with the house. All they want is their money out of the house. So, is the other party forced to sell the house and give them their half, or come up with the value of the half to give to the other party?
Sometimes there are provisions in wills and probate documents that address that, but if not, they're co-owners, and they could sue for sale for division. And so basically one can buy the other out, or they sell the property and split the proceeds. But they take a lawsuit and a judge to tell them they have to do that when you've got two unwilling partners. So probate court can do it, or you can go ahead and make a claim against your partner, sue for sale for division, The judge say, okay, you'll take 3 or 4 offers and average them out and go to the highest bidder, and there'll be some parameters set in that particular. So they don't have to remain partners. There's ways out of it, but it takes litigation unless they agree.
Sometimes family members will come to an agreement, right, and settle it all and tell probate, we've reached an agreement on what we're going to do. And
well, oftentimes you'll have a personal representative that will come in and take a collection of the assets, provide a list of the probate court, all the parties, and then sometimes they can take direction from the beneficiaries if it works into that. But the personal representative gets 2% in, 2% out of the estate, and those are from doing those executive type duties and secretarial duties to get all this sorted out. So hopefully everybody can agree. If not, it goes into litigation.
Got a text question from someone who says, I was denied workers' comp for a carpal tunnel on both hands about 15 years ago, but I'm still having complications from that. Is it too late to reopen the case?
It has. When you're talking about carpal tunnel, typically it's like repetitive injuries.
Yeah.
So if you're on the refrigerator line, you're constantly making the same motions and you get some type of injury, then that's typically covered. Now, under the statute of limitations, you have to bring that case within 2 years date of the injury or 2 years from your last date of temporary total disability benefit payments. And so if it was 15 years ago, it may not be a claim, but let's say her last exposure to cause that repetitive injury was within that 2-year gap, then she could maintain that action and ask a judge, is this related to my particular job? And that it would be covered. And remember, under comp, you're entitled to medical bills paid, but you have to go through a workers' compensation approved physician, 2/3 of your wage, and if you have a permanent impairment, then something based on that permanent impairment. And unfortunately, it's a formula that spits out a number.
Okay.
Hadn't been changed since the early 70s, so it really does not pay to be an injured worker in Alabama.
Yeah. We've got Harry on the line with a question or comment from Decatur. Hi, Harry. Thanks for calling in. What's your comment tonight?
Thank you.
Sure.
I had an unusual situation this past weekend. I went to a convention and I had an exhibit, and to carry my product to exhibit, I had bought a rolling suitcase at a yard sale.
Okay.
And then when I got to the convention, unzipped the side of it, and there was 2 ounces of cocaine.
Okay.
So I called the exhibit people there, brought the local police over.
So I think we've lost Harry. He wants to know, would his name end up in any records related to it?
Is that your real name, Harry?
If they didn't arrest him,
we don't know the end of the story.
We don't know how it turned out. Did they arrest him?
The question is, would his name end up in any report? Yeah. I would think so. If he's the one who turned it in, the investigation said, hey, that's the one who turned it in. Now, would he be charged with possession? He could be, and he might not be. I wonder what happened to the rest of the story. Harry, give us a shout next week, or give us a shout back. We got
Harry,
to be
did
continued.
You get arrested? Hey, Harry, did you get arrested? No, I think we've lost him.
Okay.
Okay. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back answering more of your questions about legal issues in the news. Stay with us.
advertising fee to this station.
We aren't finished yet, but write this down. If you're not getting your question answered tonight, here's how to get in touch with Will League with Timberlake League and Brooks. 256-536-0770 or 800-804-2502. The website is law-injury.com, and if you like them on Facebook, you can learn more about the law that way.
And our own Sharon Doviet, family law attorney, child custody and divorce, 539-7337, SharonFamilyLaw.com.
Okay, there was a traffic death in Huntsville, I think it was Friday night. Something new with how police can charge. What?
You know, right, in the past, the police have to say, look, this is under investigation. We'll let you know, but now they can charge they basically say what they think happened and charge the defendant. Now, still have to go to the grand jury, preliminary hearing. You know, it doesn't take away the rights of the defendant, but they can go ahead and declare what they think it is. So it gives them a little more leeway.
And that happened for the first time. That happened for the first time.
First time this weekend they were able to charge, you know, there at the scene that we're arresting him for vehicular homicide, that sort of thing.
Very interesting.
Still an allegation, but at least they can declare what they think it is based on the evidence that's right in front of them. That's a good step for them.
And we're going to remind you that we've got the wheelchairs that are available. If you need a wheelchair available for some of the events at the BBC.
A lot of people taking care of their parents, having mobility issues, go see a show and call us. We'll get you there.
Thanks to Timberlake League and Brooks. Thanks for your questions tonight. We'll see you next week.
Good night.